Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're so happy to have Randy Wootton, one of the coolest, most impressive execs I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Randy, would love to get an intro from you for the audience and tell us who you are and all that.
Well, after that, I'm just going to walk out the door, Brian. That was great. Thank you. And, truly winning is a we thing, and having you on the team was awesome. So, short version, I've been in technology for about 23 years. Actually, my first part of my career, I was in the military. So, the first 8 to 10 years of my life was in the military. Then I went into technology. The first part of technology was marching up the corporate ladder, working at tech companies like Microsoft and Salesforce and a couple of startups. And then the last 10 years have been more C-suite roles, been CEO of 3 companies, including one public company, one venture-backed private company. Both of those we sold. And then I had a great opportunity after I sold the second one to stay on at the company we sold to called Seismic, which we talk about that. And I got to watch a great CEO, Doug Winter, and watch how he had to do things. And I didn't have to be the CEO, which was fun. And then most recently, last 18 months, I jumped into a company called Maxio, which is the mashup of legacy SaaS optics and Chargify. So it's a billing and financial operations platform sold to B2B SaaS companies. So if people in your audience are interested in doing revenue recognition and revenue reporting, like we can help solve that problem. The other thing which has been cool, Brian, is I have had the good fortune to be on boards, not just the ones that I was a CEO of. So like you in your role, you get a chance to do a little bit more pattern matching in that way. And it's a lot of fun. I describe it as nose in, fingers out. I get to ask lots of questions, but I'm not accountable for it. And
I love that.
I've
never heard that
wonderful.
phrase. That's how I feel as an investor. I'm nose in and I'm pretty hands off, right? I think we try to be reactive, but not proactive. So, we say, hey, what do you need? Like, how can we help? And how can we help ignite you? But we don't like meddle in the business. I feel like that's the wrong way to invest.
Yeah, well, I think the advantage you have, Brian, as an investor is you are an operator. And I think there are a lot of investors who weren't. So I think you have an appreciation for what does it mean to be in the muck and trying to get stuff done, and you're executing against a set of plans and things aren't going the way you want them to, and other things are going well. And then you get this board meeting, depending on what the frequency is, where you're trying to pop out and represent things and get feedback and move forward. And I do think there's a sense of investors wanting to be, how do you get on your same side of the table? So one of the things I suggest is, and I don't know what the right size company is, but getting an independent observer on the board. And so maybe it's Series B, Series C. I had one at Percolate, a guy named Tony Zingale, who had been my mentor at Rocket Fuel. And it was so helpful having someone who had a lot of context and background and was just an operator. And then at the company I am now, Maxio, we're majority owned by batteries. So the board is the general partner, Chelsea, principal Dylan, who are both great, been in the space forever, know a whole bunch. But we also have the chairman of the board is a guy, Jason Parkman, serial entrepreneur, very successful. And again, just an operator. And so sometimes they're telling me hard things. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And Jason's like, oh, no, you really need to think about this. And so it just changes the type of advice you're getting. But also, like, I have a meeting with Jason next week where there's some things I want to check in on, because I thought I was saying it right, but I don't think I got it across to the board. So having an intermediary, Switzerland, a liaison that can help between management and core investors is really helpful too.
Yeah. Well, someday I'll tap your shoulder for a board observer seat on one of my portfolio companies.
That'd be fun.
I have too many portfolio companies to do any of that. So I rely on people like you in my network to do the dirty work for me. But I would love to, just go chronologically. I think you've had such an interesting career arc and journey. Let's go all the way back to your military, getting into the military. What was that process like, and how did you make that decision? And because it's something that I almost did as well. I took the ASTB to go be a Navy pilot, and I was getting very serious with my girlfriend, then girlfriend, now wife, and I decided not to go. And I was also accepted into the Air Force Academy and didn't go. So I kind of dodged the military twice. For various reasons, but I would love to hear about that journey and how you made that decision and how it made you who you are.
God. Well, all right. So I'm sitting on the couch now. We're going to get into the core of who I am. Look, Brian, at the end of the day, I think as a republic, all citizens should serve in some capacity.
I 100% agree.
I don't think that
100%
has
agree.
to be military. You can
Yeah.
be a police officer, firefighter, you could be a teacher, but for some part of your career, give something back.
Yeah.
Because the republic needs it. And a bunch of our smart people aren't doing that.
And we need something galvanizing in our culture,
Yeah,
a shared identity, right?
yeah.
That isn't, NBC television or something like that.
Yeah,
We
well,
need yeah.
yeah. And I think the other thing is we want our Congress to be people who have either served or have children in the military, so that when they send our young men and women into war, they realize the personal cost of it. And so I think there right now fewer than, I think, 8% of Congress has some military exposure. I mean, clearly our president does, but it is the power to declare war and ship out sailors, soldiers, etc. is extraordinary. And we need people to be mindful. So I think there's a commitment to the republic. I also think, to your point, Brian, like when I went to the Naval Academy, so the rationale, you tell me when to shut up when it gets boring.
No, I love it. I love it.
I knew I wanted to go do service. For me, it was about being in the military. My grandfather had been in the Navy, and so I love sailing boats. And so I got aligned around that. And I remember my grandfather, who hadn't gone to the Naval Academy, he had an option to apply or didn't or something. He was a lieutenant commander, and he had a admiral tell him that he was probably on track for admiral if he'd gone to the Naval Academy. And so he said to me, "Look, Randy, you can do whatever you want, but if your goal is to be a lifer, right, to go in the military and serve,
you want to be a leader there." Yeah.
Your best path to admiral is through the academy. And what's fascinating, Brian, so I am class of 90, so I'm 33 years out of the Naval Academy. And I have friends now who are 3-star admirals and are at the very tip of the spear. One guy is going to take over the Fifth Fleet in Asia Pacific, which means based out of Japan. And if anything goes on with China, he's going to be the dude. Many other commanders of aircraft carriers. I don't think one of them is a commander of the aircraft carriers in the Middle East at this point. But I tell people it's interesting. I used to make history. Now I send emails, but I still have friends who are out there standing to watch. And it's really inspiring, inspiring.
How do you think it informed you? Walk me through, like, that 8 to 10 years and then transitioning into a business career. And, how did that inform the business career? I just had, just for context, Rachel Hobart from Hivers and Strivers, which is a venture capital firm that backs military veterans, entrepreneurs.
I'd love to be connected.
Really interesting a thesis. And they're a very concentrated portfolio, but we talked a lot about some of the characteristics of veterans. So how did that kind of inform and guide your career? Yeah.
Well, I think one thing, when you're in the military, you're not working for money, right? So you're doing it it's a mission-oriented job, and you're there to serve. At the time, I was all male, so you do have this dynamic around camaraderie.
Yeah.
I think it attracts people that are type AAAs that are athletic and want to win. And so I think it fosters that. I think at the Naval Academy, the other thing that happens is they set it up so you're always failing, meaning you can't get everything done that you have to get done. So you have to make choices every single day on which class you're going to take, which ones you're going to blow off, et cetera. And I think it's it's a bummer, but that's kind of a life skill. And that as you go in the military, you're an early stage startup entrepreneur, you're never going to be doing everything that you could be doing.
Yeah.
And so this ruthless prioritization process of what do you got to get done today?
Yeah.
I think their idea of a commitment to a mission, very aligned with entrepreneurs in terms of we're going to go change the world and we're going to do it as a team. I would say the other element, Brian, and I was lucky, I got into Harvard Business School, but I think the general management.
Was that right out of the military?
Yeah. So I 8 years of experience in the military and got accepted at Harvard. Harvard is one of the schools, Duke and Virginia and a couple others, that are more general management skew. And I did actually a paper. Harvard accepts 5% military every year. So it's about 40 of the 800.
So that's sort of like their quota. They're like, we're aiming to have about 5% of the class be from the military.
Yeah. The irony, and I hope not many Army people are listening to your podcast, but West Point sent the preponderance of people. So they had of the 40 people each year, it was 80% came from the military academies. Of that, number. 60% came
Wow.
from West Point, like 30 from Navy and 10 from Air Force. In some ways, it makes sense because what they're looking for military folks are leaders, people
Yeah.
who've had small unit leadership, because the other people in the room are product managers, they may have been analysts or consultants, but they haven't really dealt with the type of leadership
Yeah.
challenges getting people
And
motivated
that's
to.
what struck me when I met you when we worked together at Rocket Fuel almost 10 years ago now. When you came in, your first CRO, and you came from Salesforce,
Yeah,
where I think you're like VP of Customer Success.
yeah, exactly.
And I remember just your executive presence and leadership was
Yeah,
palpable immediately. I was like,
yeah,
oh, we have a leader here.
yeah,
So tell me about what you learned about leadership
yeah.
in the military, how that translated through HBS, and kind of some of those first roles coming out of HBS.
Yeah, so I think of the Naval Academy in West Point, not quite as good as Naval Academy, but still pretty good. Is it's a leadership laboratory, and so you are constantly put in a state of practicing leadership on the military in the military exercises you're doing, and it's just like this idea, Brian. I describe it to people: the transition from military to civilian sector. In the military, it's lead, follow, or get out of the way. Meaning, I don't care if you're going to be a leader, but if you're going to be a leader, step up and lead. And I will be a great follower. So your freshman year at the academies, you learn how to be a follower. You get crapped on by the upperclassmen. You learn how to, eat crow and do what you're told.
Mm,
But that's very deliberate, so that then when you become a leader, you know what it means to flip to be the follower when you need to be.
yeah.
When you move to the civilian sector, that the hardest thing for me was I got out of. I saw this more not at Avenue A, but at Microsoft. Was in large organizations, there's this, it's like lead, follow, or let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And like, what do
Especially
you
at
mean let's talk
Microsoft.
about it? Yeah, what's the decision that needs to be made? Who's going to make the decision? How are we going to make the
Yeah.
decision? And what you find in large organization is everybody thinks they have the veto. And one of the things that I brought
Mm,
very clearly in every job that I've been to is no. What is the decision that we're debating? How are we going to make this decision, and who's going to be held accountable? And I think that kind of is the
mm.
core of leadership, because then like, hey, this is mine, I got it, and I'm going to have to stand up and report on it. So I think this not being scared of accountability, but also bringing accountability to systems, is the
So funny
character.
you mentioned Microsoft, because that was one of the most infuriating things when I went over there from AWS. AWS has almost like a more militant culture.
Yes, totally,
It's a
totally.
lead or get out of the way,
Yeah.
disagree and commit kind of
Yep.
is
Right.
their
Yeah.
cultural. And you get to Microsoft, for right or wrong, it's just different. And it was basically that. It's like, let's get in a room and talk about this,
Yeah.
and let's do
Right.
that for months.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, who's the who's the D here?
Yeah.
Who's directly responsible, or the
Yeah.
R, or whatever, however that phrase
Yeah.
is.
So I do think, Brian, for early stage companies and CEOs, and putting in a system of accountability where you're super clear about the objectives you're pursuing, the key results that you need to drive, the metrics you're going to look at and report on to determine what's working, what's not. I call it a company operating system. Like, having that is something that, and so to your, that may have been one thing you saw at Rocket Fuel, because that's what I brought at Rocket Fuel, was like, okay, guys, we got a lot going on. We got to prioritize, focus, and execute. And I think that's a military thing as well. Is like, everybody has great plans until you hit the beach, and then everything goes sideways. But it's more about how are you building capability within a leadership team to react and respond, more respond than react, in a thoughtful way, in real time. It's like, it's the thing. I maybe similarities between the military and, I've had a couple of, flew over Iraq, I don't know, 70 combat missions, was this idea of you're just trying to manage chaos, right? You're going in and not everything's different, but all of a sudden it's an unfolding dynamic. On an airplane, I was in A6 intruders. We were flying at 500 miles an hour. It's 8 miles a minute or something like that. And it's just like, everything's changing so fast. You've got to be able to have done a bunch of training and then be ready to go as things unfold and react to it. So I do think in the startup environment, it feels a lot like that you're in this uncertain territory. You have to organize a group of people to move forward. And then you got to build the response muscle, to manage chaos and be comfortable with it, and be comfortable in chaos.
Yeah, and that's definitely, startups are chaos, right? It's
Yeah.
not you're going 1 to 10. You're not milking a cash cow. You're tackling a market and new segments, new opportunities, new feature sets. So
Yeah,
Um,
just on at one point, I was actually talking to another guy, great guy, Ron Baker, who has this great podcast, it's like Solution Enterprise or something. And he had a quote. He said, "Where do profits in companies come from? It comes from risks. Your ability to identify risk and exploit it to create opportunity that wasn't there before. If you don't take the risk, you're not going to get the profits. And so it's not about revenue minus costs equal profits. It's around how do you set up a series of bets that your experiments. So, for example, when we were at Rocket Fuel, we were a DSP, media aggregation. The business model was sort of
EMP.
we bought a DMP. So we bought a
Right.
DMP.
Yeah.
That was the bet, was no, we need to get into this first party aggregation. How do we connect those two things? And that became $100 million business. Now, it wasn't growing fast enough to offset the other business that was plummeting to earth, but it was a huge bet before I showed up that they made. And then as I got into it, I was like, oh, this is the future. We got to shift our business model from percent of media to a platform subscription management.
Right.
And we've got to change the whole way we engage with our customers. And it's very hard to do as a public company, hence why we ended up selling to a private company where they restructured it and then went to Amazon, spun some stuff out to Amazon. Yeah, so I think back to your broader point, I think the military gives you the sense at the end of the day, you're accountable for what you said you're going to do. You can't make excuses. You got to show up, and you can't be afraid, and you can't hide. Maybe that's the other piece is you never want to surprise your commander.
Ooh,
you want to be able to come in front of them and say, hey, look, something's unfolding right now. And
even when you have imperfect information, just
right.
keep communicating. Yeah.
One of my mentors at Avenue A Aquana, a guy named Clark Kokich, who I admire immensely, and I wish I could be more like him. I was at the time I had left business school. I joined Avenue A Aquana. I was helping to spin out the tech division, and I was specifically working as a relationship manager for the agency. And I remember years later, Clark said, we were chatting, and he was giving me a reference for a job. He said, Randy, the one thing I know about you is if anything went wrong, you'd be at my doorstep at 8 a.m. on Monday morning with a detailed understanding of what happened, a plan for going forward, and a commitment to communicate how things were playing out. And I was like, yeah, of course. And that is a very military type thing. And I think other people do it as well. But just this, like, something's gone sideways, you need to get clarity on what you're going to try. And then you need to report back on what's working and what's not.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us about your transition from Salesforce. You're a rising exec, obviously, yep. And Salesforce is Salesforce, right? It's a huge company. And what made you kind of jump off the corporate ladder train, so to speak, and kind of join a fledgling, billion-dollar company at the time, or Rocket Fuel was, but it was having its struggles. And you assumed the CRO role, and then eventually the CEO role. Tell us about it, kind of your thought process in that transition, and kind of some of the challenges, and ultimately, I'd love to hear your opinion on why Rocket Fuel ultimately crashed and burned.
Yeah, I burned out.
Yeah, burned out.
Yeah,
it wasn't your fault, obviously. I mean, you took the reins over. Midstream, and I remember you saying this really funny thing during an all hands. You said something. When I took the job, I had no idea it was going to be a turnaround, or I didn't realize it was going to be a turnaround. Yeah. And that's very much what it was. And I was taking a turnarounds class at Berkeley at the time because I was getting my MBA part time. I remember thinking, like, wow, I'm learning a lot watching this company kind of crash and burn.
Yeah. Well, gosh, there's a lot in there. So,
lot to unpack.
So I did do a startup right out of the gate, Avenue A Aquana.
Okay.
I tell people why I joined that was I wanted to be in the internet. I graduated in 2000. And everybody had already started getting in 97. If you were in business school in 98, 99, you were off the back end. You were never going to make it. And so I was like, oh my God, I got to join the internet. And I joined a great company. I decided at some point to go to Microsoft. We were living in England. I had opened up the international offices and had that great experience of being biz dev dude, opening offices, regions, etc. But I had tapped out. So I went to Microsoft, spent a bunch of years there, which is great, left Microsoft. And what was interesting at that time, after the 2001 meltdown, all the VCs had pulled back their money from San Francisco back into San Francisco. And there were only a couple of VCs in the Seattle area, like Madrona and Vulcan, and one other I'm totally flaking on. Eric Benson will kill me if he ever hears this. But not Wildcat. Anywho, and I had a mentor say, Randy, if you want to be in the mix, you got to move to San Francisco. So going to Salesforce was they were recruiting me to come down as an executive because I'd been an executive at Microsoft to come to Salesforce. What I didn't fully realize, Brian, was I had a pretty senior job at Microsoft, and I came to Salesforce. I was probably a step down from where I had been in terms of influence and impact at Microsoft. And for me, I spent a couple of years working and trying to do great stuff, but I wasn't getting to the next level. And I
At
felt
Microsoft,
like
you're a partner level, or was it VP level?
yeah. So at Microsoft, I left as a VP,
which is pretty senior at Microsoft.
Yeah, not a corporate VP. So there's only like, I don't know.
VP and then CVP, yeah.
Right. I think there's CVP, there were like 400 CVPs and like 140 SVPs. And so I was in that next range, but it was a partner level.
In between
role.
Partner,
Yeah, and it was fine. I mean, it was great. They paid well. Like my friends who stayed, they're done. That did that. And, Saatchi made them a whole bunch of money. So my wife was like, "Really? Did we really need to leave Microsoft?"
Yeah.
But I wanted an opportunity to be the captain of the ship, and I think that's another thing maybe from the military is at some point you're just driven by this. I think a lot of people are driven to be the captain. Right. And so I knew that was where I wanted to go. The opportunities were going to be more plentiful in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Salesforce was a great opportunity, but the lesson learned I would have for people if they're still doing the corporate march is once you show up, unlike in the military where you have your rank on your sleeve and you've got all your battle ribbons and people can see where you've been and done that, when you show up, you're not walking around with your resume saying, see, here's all the cool things I've done. I can do more. I can do more. It's you are confined by the role that you're in.
Yeah.
And if you do great, it's almost like you have a reset on your career. And so there were people I was working for or working with. I was like, guys, I ran a business that was 3 times bigger than what you're doing. And you're having me do this little piece. Like it doesn't feel commensurate with the value that I could offer. So there was something there, Brian, where I just felt like I was just never able to get it just right in terms of what I felt. I tell people I was like an 8-cylinder car only using 4 cylinders. And I kept trying to get the other cylinders going, but I could just never make it quite work. So I was looking for an opportunity. I got recruited by Rocket Fuel as a CRO role. Specifically because they just bought the DMP and what they wanted was people with platform experience. So the fact I'd been at Microsoft and then had done another little startup that had done Salesforce, this is the other sort of lesson learned for people is where you work matters.
Yeah.
The reputation of the company you come from, you want to be one of those gold standard companies. So the fact I worked at Salesforce, it almost didn't matter what I did at Salesforce.
Yeah.
I kind of had credibility in the SaaS world.
Yeah.
And I
remember approaching you too. And I remember, saying, hey, we need to switch to Agile like Salesforce did. You remember that when I approached you in the lunchroom? And I barely knew you. I was like, hey, you came from Salesforce. Can you talk to our head of engineering and let them know, like, I think we should move to Agile? And Salesforce did it like 10 years ago, and they did a really good job of it. And that's exactly true. It's like having that experience is so valuable.
Well, I think it's experience. Sometimes I think it's over credit for like, I wasn't a product manager at Salesforce. I hadn't run an engineering team. So the fact that Salesforce had done it, all I could say is, yeah, it works for Salesforce. But you get a halo or you get a benefit, a brand benefit by working at some of these great companies.
Yeah.
The CEO of Seismic, where we sold Percolate, said something similar to me. In terms of what he wanted to build, the company he wanted to build at Seismic. It's now big. It should go public at some point. I don't have any insider
information. In a way, it's almost like the first domino to fall was getting into the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
Like that's a quality, that's the first feather in your cap. And then every other domino kind of fell over from that.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think, I went to a good high school. I had parents who were supportive. I was on a good track, but I do think going to the Naval Academy, I would say broadly in the business sector, unless people have experience with the military or like you had applied to the military and appreciate it, sometimes people think military guys are a bunch of knuckleheads. And I will tell you, a lot of my classmates at Harvard thought we were knuckleheads. And yeah, we probably were compared to just intellectual processing power for some of the people coming out of the big hedge funds and the banks. But I think we had this other element, which
the leadership element.
Business is not just about how your IQ; it's a lot of EQ. But I do think the other
grit
and grit, right? Yeah, just
determination.
Get it done.
Yeah, just get you done.
I will say what's been interesting with Microsoft is I spent 7.5 years at Microsoft, and the advice I got at that point was, if you're there after 10 years, no startup will touch you because you've been Microsoft.
I can
Having
see
said
that.
that,
Yeah.
I think, and even then, when I was looking for jobs, people will look at me kind of like, you went to Microsoft? Why did you spend so much time at Microsoft? I would say today, after what Satya has done, Microsoft has become a brand that people recognize as, really software-y, which, is
Yeah.
great.
Right.
Um, so I don't know if I ever told you this story, Brian. So I show up, left this nice job at Salesforce. It wasn't the job I wanted, but I
Yeah.
came to Rocket Fuel as CRO to build out this business, this platform business. 30 days after I started, they let go of the CEO. And that was
That was
huge
Monty,
for
who's
me.
interim, right?
Well, Monty stepped in because he was
Monty
on the
stepped
board.
in.
He
Yeah.
became interim CEO, chairman of the board. It was George John.
Oh, it was the founder, George John. Okay. Yeah.
And George was one of the guys I'd interviewed with, and I was super excited because he's a brilliant AI
Yeah.
guy. I
Yeah.
mean, absolutely one of the pioneers, he and Richard and team, in terms of first gen predictive AI. I'm like, holy smokes, what do I do now? Because the person I was going to work for is now gone.
Yeah.
And so Monty stepped in at interim CEO, and he's kind of military dude. He's hard charging, wicked smart AI guy,
Yeah.
also an incredible marketer. And he basically said, well, you got two choices. You can quit, or you can hang on to see who they hire as CEO and then decide. And
Yeah.
so that's what I said I would do. And they spent 6 months looking for a CEO. During that time, because of the business context of Rocket Fuel and everything was going on, they couldn't find a successful CEO to come in and take it on. I think they found candidates who were like me, senior executives at like an Oracle or Microsoft, who wanted their first time CEO gig. And I think what worked to my advantage was I'd been working with Monty for 6 months, and he knew me, I knew him. And they're like, well, if we wanted someone that was a VP at a large company to come in, we got one. And so they gave me the opportunity. Initially, I said no, because I thought I wanted to go be a COO first and really learn how to operate a company. And Monty sat me down and he said, Randy, look, there are only like 4,000 public companies. If you ever wanted to be a public company CEO, this is your opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to be hard, but this is
Yeah.
your opportunity. So going back to that point of you want to be the captain of your ship, you got to be willing to, luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. You got to be able to step into it.
Yeah.
And dude, it was a buzzsaw. It was so hard. And I think that's one of the hardest things about being a CEO. And a first time gig public company CEO is no one teaches you how to be a CEO.
Yeah.
And I was CRO. I kind of knew the numbers. I was running that, but I didn't understand all the expenses. And we're acting as a bank for the agencies. There were all these things around capital structure and public company, blah blah blah, that it was baptism by fire. And so I think the first year was executing the platform play, trying to unscrew our relationship with the channel, which is I'm just one guy, but I think Rocket Fuel did itself a great disservice by going public, and in doing so, revealing its margins. Because then its entire channel, it did two things. One, it was trying to sell around the agencies and going direct to brand. And the agencies are like, what are you doing? You're screwing us. Number two is we were making 60% margin and they're making 10% margin. So they thought we were cheating.
Yeah.
What you see as the counterexample is the Trade Desk. The Trade Desk came out, wicked smart guy. I knew him at Microsoft. He had done a program at ECN and then sold that to Microsoft and then left and started the Trade Desk. And he was agency first. And he was like, in the advertising ecosystem, agencies are incredibly important. I'm going to line up with my channel and I'm going to make sure they're successful. And he's grown a multi-billion-dollar business.
Oh yeah. So like a $4 or $5 billion company now. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's a combination of business model. It's understanding your channel dynamics. It's channel dynamics, both how you're going to work with or against your channel, and then also who's making the money. And I think that is in that first gen AI world where we were turning 3 times better ROI for campaigns that were going through Rocket Fuel. That was astounding. Like if you got incremental improvements of 10% on a campaign, people were like, woohoo! We're doing 300% improvement for the advertisers that were using our system. So it was absolutely transformational and total bummer. It burned out. So the other piece we didn't talk about on the burnout, which I didn't fully appreciate, was the Rocket Fuel media arbitrage model is you buy media, so you have to pay money, and then you have to get your money from the agencies who have to get the money from the advertisers. So you're actually acting like a bank. all your cash is going into inventory for media inventory. And so you spend all of this time and energy bridging the gap in terms of the cash. The faster you grow, the more cash you consume. So it was a really interesting lesson learned in how do you manage your working capital, and how do you set up terms. Agencies always slow pay. Advertisers slow pay their agencies. Agencies aren't going to pay you till they get paid.
Yeah,
And
it's a kind
so
of a
you're
whipsaw effect in the operating
totally,
model. Yeah.
totally. And it's the business model you hooked your wagon to. The platform business model is different. You pay a subscription fee, but you're getting a lot less on a gross revenue because you're not taking the inventory, but you're getting a lot more on the net revenue and potential profitability.
Well,
So
yeah,
it was the
on the
right.
margins, you're 90+% on a SaaS platform model.
Yep.
Yeah, versus the other way that you're describing,
Yep.
which is almost like you got this marketplace middleman problem.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think that was it. What I would, two other thoughts. One is, when you're trying to do that type of transformation, it's very hard to do it in the public markets because public investors don't understand. So that is why you have all these PE companies that take public companies private, is to reboot it, pair off some low functioning assets, skinny it up, and then go resell it or put it with another platform. So it was a perfect take private. We had a inbound that set that all in motion. And as a public company, you have to entertain viable offers, to maximize shareholder value. And so there was a lot of conversations. I would say, so year 2, while I was at Rocket Fuel, was just dealing with the process in terms of trying to sell the company and who was going to buy and what we were going to do with it. And so a lot of lessons learned there too.
Yeah. And what was next for you after that? So Rocket gets acquired, and what's next for
So
Randy?
that was where I took a little time off, went and learned how to surf. Well, I didn't learn how to surf. I got my ass handed to me in Costa Rica trying to learn how to surf. But I said what I wanted was to join a pure platform company. I wanted to be marketing, not advertising, and I wanted to be somewhere in expansion growth. So they had product market fit. They had a replicable sales model. What they needed to do was scale, because that's, I think, where I have some interesting capability. It's how do you lead people, build organizations, streamline operations, drive scale. And so that was Percolate. So I joined them, and it was a sweet. And the other thing I wanted was to be funded by a top tier syndicate. Going back to that conversation about who you do business with matters. So we had Sequoia, GGV, Lightspeed, first round capital on the board. Nice. And I will tell you, having those folks on the board means everybody takes my phone call. And even if they weren't going to invest money, they were going to take the call. And I think for early stage investors working with you, as they take that next step up, who are they adding to the board? Maybe even taking a hit on the valuation to get not just the brand, but the partner at the company that really does know the space, has the connections, and can add value beyond just telling you to increase revenue or reduce costs. And it makes it different if you have a top tier syndicate.
It does, yeah. And then so walk us through Percolate. What was
so Percolate came in, did a transformation with them, moved them from social media competing with Sprite, Spreadfast, and Sprout to there's a new category called content marketing. Transformation was going probably not as fast as anybody wanted, so we were entertaining going out to see if there were some strategics that we could line up with. We got connected actually via one of our investors, JMI, Lightspeed. Had the guy on my board was from Lightspeed, and he was plugged in with Seismic out of San Diego. Got to know the CEO and started talking about this broader content ecosystem, moving from marketing to sales, and how do you need to connect the pieces and return ROI. And so a lot of passion around the space. We had a joint vision of what could be possible, and we put a deal together, and that was I think a solid transaction for the employees, for the customers, for the technology. And I decided to continue on with them, which was probably one of the best decisions I made for two reasons, Brian. One was I just got a chance to detox, having been two-year tours, intense turnarounds, just really, really hard. So having the opportunity to be employed, but not have to be the CEO was great. Number two was I took over, I was president of Percolate, but I was also chief strategy officer. So I got to build my chops as an M&A guy. We did 2 acquisitions. We did 1 strategic investment. Got to look at a lot of different people through the process, learn working with our board about how to think about the ecosystem. So it was a great learning experience. Very, very different rhythm when you're the M&A corp dev dude. Like, you're kind of Pluto to everybody else's on Earth. Every once in a while you show up, you're like, hey, we got a deal.
Or like
And
Haley's
then,
Comet,
a year
it kind of
later,
flies close to Earth every once in a while or something. Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah. And they're like, oh, great. And then, you're back off doing whatever you're doing. So very, very different than when you're the CEO and you're the nexus of all information.
Everything. Yeah.
Everything's happening. You're not making all the decisions, but you're aware of everything that's happening, I think. But it was good. I had a very small team. It was a good 2 years. And then I knew I wanted to get back in the seat.
Yeah.
And so I took some time off, went skiing, rode my bike. Battery Ventures, another top tier company, reached out for the Maxio opportunity, which was bring 2 companies together, execute the integration, and make it a platform. And I'm in the majority owned fund, meaning that they're more like a PE versus VC. But we've been looking to buy companies since I started. We're going to buy more. So all of those skills that I had I'm deploying them, which is great.
Nice.
In a different context. I wanted to move out of go-to-market tech. So I wanted to become a CEO, a professional CEO that could take the skills and transfer them to a different industry. Ultimately, if I'm successful, it would be like what we were talking about earlier, jokingly, is I'd just like to be a board guy at some point, hang around and I don't know, ride my bike and then go to board meetings.
That's amazing. So yeah, tell us about, give us a quick overview of Maxio and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, so we are solving the problem that I felt acutely at Percolate, which is B2B SaaS companies trying to do rev rec and revenue reporting, which allows you to then do your MRR schedule or your ARR waterfalls. You're able to see your customers and what's working, what's not, their gross retention, net retention, but it also provides all the SaaS operating metrics like LTV to CAC, magic number. So all of that data that's comes out of your billing and invoicing system is what we're able to provide. So it makes it super easy to manage your board, your investors. It makes it a lot easier.
Well, especially if you're a SaaS company going out and raising from SaaS investors like Craft Ventures or something like that.
You got it. They're pattern matching. Yeah. They know what the numbers should be. They have all their benchmarks from OpenView and Insight Partners and everybody else, and they want to see what your numbers are. Yeah. I was talking to a guy who runs one of the largest law firms in the Southeast, and he had this quote. He said, the number one deal killer is accounting errors. The accounting errors come from ARR.
Yeah.
No one knows what's going on because they're trying to track it in Excel. Their contracts are in a filing cabinet. And it is, when you go in and do the forensic accounting, it is a nightmare if you don't have a system like Maxio. So I had that problem when we brought it on board at Percolate. I was against bringing on yet another technology. My CFO said we had to take it, and it changed our lives, Brian. So the difference was, rather than waiting for the CFO to close the books the first 8 to 10 days, and then you start working on your SaaS operating metrics and gross retention, churn, et cetera, and you work on that for 8 to 10 days, and you're sliding into the board meeting, your hair on fire, you're like, I think this is right.
Yeah.
What you get instead is, on day one, you push the button, you got your ARR and your revenue. And so then you can spend time in parallel with your CS, your customer success person, while the CFO is closing the books to get the 3 financial statements. You're working through all the operating metrics and what's happening, what's the story here, where are we seeing what's working, what's not, what's our new pricing doing, what's happening with renewals. And so you get to spend that month, not you spending all your time getting ready for the board meeting, but just kind of understanding what just happened and what experiments are working, which ones aren't. So that's the problem that I felt at Percolate. When we acquired companies at Seismic, one company had legacy SaaS optics, one didn't. It was so much easier doing the due diligence to acquire the company that had it and then integrating them into the systems than it was for the one that didn't have it.
Right.
So I've seen it as an operator, I've seen it as someone selling a company, and I've seen it as an acquirer in terms of what having this insight around your business operations can solve for you.
What's the kind of the minimal ARR threshold typically that someone should or wants to deploy something like this?
So we have two value props. One is we're a billing solution. Often, most companies now are usage-based PLG, getting up and running, and they got a product and they want to get a website up and a billing portal. So think about your Stripe
Yeah.
folks. That's what we compete with. We don't have a self-serve option, so it is a step up, but you can be in for, call it $500 a month, so $6,000. At about 30 employees, what you'll find is companies are starting to introduce a professional CFO, so either fractional CFO or head of finance controller, and that's where they've taken on private money. The investors at that stage are like, we really want to see the reports. We want them to be consistent every month. And that's our second value prop, which is that rev rec and reporting piece. You get all of it and you can grow into it over time. So we have 50 public companies are using us in different divisions. We have 100 companies-ish that are greater than 100 million that are using us. So wide range, but we're predominantly focused on early stage companies, probably $1 million to 30 million.
Okay, got it. Yeah, well, I'll keep that in mind. Let's switch to
all your portfolio companies should be using it, Brian.
Yeah, for $500 a month they should. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get you teed up.
Yeah,
I'll get you a special
deal.
deal.
Some of the details on that afterwards. Yeah.
Brian, the thing for VCs, which is the pitch I've been trying to tell people, is we have this multi-entity capability. And so you could have all your portfolio companies on it, and then you have the roll-up report. So think about how much time you're spending aggregating reports from people with different Excel files every single month, you or your analyst, and then you're having to report to your LPs.
Yeah.
Like that goes away.
Yeah.
You have the report is ready to go on day one, and you can look at everybody and you have the historical trends. The challenge is for you all, what I've heard is VCs, they want to be super light touch and telling their companies what they need to adopt. And so it's, how do you balance the, no, this is really going to be good for you, and it's going to be good for us. It's not just about getting visibility.
Well, and I think that million threshold is the right one. I think that's where things start getting kind of a little bit more sophisticated. Reporting requirements get a little bit more stringent, and you start kind of. It's not just about the top line ARR growth anymore. It's kind of looking at all the inputs into that. And some of the best companies that I've interacted with are very on top of all that. So it's
I would say a lot of our best customers are people who have done it once before.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to repeat the sins of the past, and they know how hard it was to manage this and to scale it, and so it's great to have repeat customers.
Yeah, so let's switch to a rapid fire round.
Sure.
What's one book every entrepreneur should read or leader?
Oh gosh, I think those are two different things. I think how about play bigger? Because I think what's fun about being in the SaaS world is about category creation and being super clear about minimum viable category, and then understanding where you fit, how you define it, and how you depose the other folks. A close second would be Traction Gap by a guy named Bruce Cleland. That came out of the Wildcat. I think he talks about 4 architectures. So rather than Series A, Series B, Series C, there's these 4 things. You need to have a revenue model, you need to have a tools model, you need to have a people model, and all 4 of those things need to be worked on in coordination. And you can't go faster from minimum viable category to minimum viable product to minimum viable revenue. You can't go faster than the slowest of the 4.
Yeah.
So I think it's a broader way of understanding how to build business at different stages.
And we should probably take this opportunity to plug your podcast. You told me right before we started recording that you started a podcast. Tell us more about that and what it is, why you're doing it, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's called Expert Voices. It's all the cool kids have podcasts, and it is to try to bring together SaaS experts, primarily focused on the office of the CFO and the role of the CFO, but not exclusive to that. I think one of the reasons I came over to Maxio was because I think the transformation that we saw in marketing and sales due to technology, data, and business model is now impacting the office of the CFO. And so I've got this great chance, like you do, meet lots of interesting people and just want to bring exposure to those people more broadly. So build the brand of Maxio.
Yeah.
That we're here, that CFOs, people that 90% of people aren't in market. We're a new brand. We're 18 months behind Maxio. We want people to know that we're here on behalf of finance and accounting executives.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think the aha moment for me was I had over 100 portfolio companies, and I got invited to a podcast, and I was like, wait, I should probably do this.
Yeah.
I should probably
Well,
talk to all the amazing people I know.
well, I mean, you do know a lot, and I think that it's just this interesting dynamic. This whole podcast revolution, and it's just radio basically. I mean, it's got video if you put it on YouTube, but most people are listening to it when they're walking
It's a
or
long
riding their
tail of
bike.
every topic you can ever imagine wanting to
Yeah.
listen to. I think that's kind of how I
Yeah.
would characterize it. Some of my episodes really pop unexpectedly, and some of the ones I think are going to do well don't. And I think you have this, I don't know, the infinite content world where every niche can get filled now by anyone.
Yeah.
And I called it Ignite because I just wanted to be able to just talk to anybody about anything.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I would say there's a guy who's CEO of Paddle. So I saw him speak at SaaStock in Europe about a year and a half ago. And he talked about media-led growth. And this idea, and podcasts are an example of media-led growth, blogs, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're trying to break through, you need to have a point of view. You need to be offering something that people, it's not an echo chamber. You're not just regurgitating what everybody else is saying. So you have this thought leadership foundation and pillars that you're emphasizing, but you gotta be in the milieu. You gotta be in the conversation. And so how do you do that? Podcast is one way to do it. I'll tell you this, we like everybody else host dinners around this country, and we invite CFOs. We get, I don't know, 10 to 15 to show up. We pay for a person to come talk. We pay for dinner. So $20,000 a shot.
Yeah.
They've led to some deals. They haven't led to a lot of deals. So podcasts, if we're able to get thousands of people listening over time, and it leads to a couple of deals, it's a much more scalable way.
It's already,
has it?
Yeah, it's helped me land LPs. It's helped my founders land investments, new customers. I mean, it's a flywheel that self-reinforces everything I'm doing. And it's like, oh, this obviously just fits Team Ignite. I should have done this a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah. That's great. Well, good for you. I think you do have to, and you clearly are doing this. I mean, you got to be engaging. You got to have a point of view. You got to be able to have a conversation. You got to be able to have great guests, I think, that people want to hear from.
Hopefully I'm checking all those boxes.
You are. So far, I'm listening. The problem now is I think people have kind of a podcast threshold. Like, I can manage and stay on
there's
top
like 3 or 4 that I follow personally. It's like All In Podcast. Obviously, I listen to that every week. 20 VC sometimes. Lenny's podcast is pretty good. It's about creating great products. What about you? What are some ones that you?
So I sort of random set. I always listen to The Daily. Okay. New York Times, The Daily. Love that. The Ezra Klein Show. I really like Renegade Marketers Unite by Drew Nicer. The guy, or Nicer, he is awesome in my legacy in marketing. I just love the stories he's telling. It's all focused on B2B marketing. I will listen to periodically like A16Z podcast because they're doing stuff that's super cool.
I'll listen to that sometimes. Yeah, that's a good one.
Run the Numbers. Do you know Run the Numbers by a guy? He's a CFO, CJ Gustafsson or something, but trying to, because I'm targeted the CFO persona, learning more about him. I'll tell you one that is probably, and then I have sort of random ones that I listen to. One that I have really enjoyed so far is History of English, which goes back to the roots of the English as a language and walks through thousands of years of what's happened and how it's become the way how we talk about it. And then I'm a big fan of Fresh Air and Throughline, kind of the NPR ones when I'm driving. So I do, it's almost like different mood music depending on what I'm doing. But if I'm out walking or doing the erg or riding a bike, I'll listen to the business ones on 1.5. And I'm just looking for content and ideas.
It refreshes my memory of something I heard you say one time, like how early you get up, what your morning routine is. You're like an early riser, like a super early riser. 5 or
5:30, get up early. We always work out once, every morning, because that's the only time I have for me.
Yeah.
But it always I describe it as operating at the edge of my own ignorance, that I'm always looking for new books or new ideas to learn. And so we used to have a book club at Rocket Fuel. We have a book club at Maxio.
I didn't know about that book club. There's a book club at Rocket Fuel? I had no idea.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, well.
I need to join a book club. I think that'd be beneficial.
I will tell you, so I'm in 4 book clubs.
Wow.
One of which I'm super excited to share is it's actually almost like a seminar. It's called the Slow Read Symposium, and we can put it in the show notes. You meet each week. You take a part of a text, and you have a set of people talking about it. It came out of, I went to, in addition to the Naval Academy, Harvard, I have a Master of Arts in Liberal Arts from St. John's College, which is a great books program, and yeah. So when I was teaching at the Naval Academy in literature, you had to get a master's. So I went and got a master's of great books. I thought I was going to teach and realized I couldn't make any money. So I went into business. But my passion is teaching. And so like right now we're reading Macbeth.
Oh,
and
wow.
So tomorrow
is
night.
It like a very slow read, like you do like a chapter 2 or 3 at a time?
That's it.
Yeah.
And what's awesome about that, Brian, is it allows you to, like, we literally you read the section ahead of time, but you read in this case, you read the scenes that you're working on the night that you're going through it, gets you in the mood, and then you have a really productive conversation, hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. Not that expensive, like $250 for a quarter.
Oh, that's cool.
I've done, I did Machiavelli's Discourse on Levy, and I've done 4 or 5 Shakespeare plays. And I was an English major 20-something years ago. I haven't read Shakespeare since, and it's been awesome. So highly recommend that if you're interested. Happy to give you some more information.
I'll look it up
on your podcast.
I'd be remiss. We only have a few minutes left, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the whole OpenAI, Sam Altman firing, kind of like, what do you think about this? As a CEO that, like, just summarily dismissed over the weekend, what do you think's going down over there?
Well, I have no inside information.
Yeah, of course you don't.
Maybe the last no, but what I can infer by reading the reports is it seems like one of the things about OpenAI was there's this tension between it being a nonprofit trying to have AI for good, right?
And the speed of commercialization. I think there was like this disagreement.
Commercialization versus how do you just create guardrails around AI? Like you and I remember this from. Like I talk about when we were at Rocket Fuel, there was 2 visions of AI, the Jetsons and the Terminator. And you remember, the brand with Rocket Fuel, when we were trying to sell to media planners, they were thinking about job displacement. And so we started this whole messaging around not artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence and how it could help
human in the loop. I remember. Better. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so, and what you found was that's exactly what happened. Media planners got to learn how to use AI in their jobs, and they changed things and they did other stuff. So I think what we had was this tension with OpenAI between, I heard someone describe it, the boomers and the doomers. The boomers are AI is going to lead to this Jetson future, and the doomers is no, it's going to be the Terminator. And Altman, my understanding, was more along the lines of boomer, but the board was more like doomer, and they wanted more guardrails. But oh my God, I have never seen anything like this play out in the public markets. That there was no investors on the board, right? Microsoft putting $13 billion in, but not having any visibility until a minute before the guy was fired. That's insane. So
I think that, there's a governance kind of problem there where historically, I think, you're right. The board had the doomer mentality. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Ultimately, as a CEO, if you're not bootstrapped, you're playing with someone else's money, and your obligation is to maximize shareholder value.
Right.
Full stop. Now, you can do well and do good, meaning you can create an AI company that's going to go out and make an impact in the world and do good for society. And I appreciate AI as a technology is one we need to be careful around. So you certainly want to do that. But your goal needs to be, you got money and you need to return value to the shareholders. And so if shareholders don't have a way to influence how you're thinking about decisions, then something's wrong in governance.
Yeah, amen. Well, this has been fantastic. I feel like we could have talked for another hour at least. Maybe we'll have you on the podcast at another future date. Thank you so much for spending time out of I'm sure your very busy schedule to chat it up with me.
My pleasure, Brian. Always great catching up. Congratulations on all your success. And it's been fun to watch it from the outside line. And I look forward to continuing the conversation as you go forward.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, take care.